Welcome to the Be Empowered podcast with your host, Graham Hopkins. My goal is to help you regain your power by bridging the gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are. In simple language, that is like making your childhood dreams come true. This is for those who want to make an impact in their lives but don't know how to get there. Be ensured, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. So welcome everybody to today's show, the Be Empowered show. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Dianne Collins. So Dianne, welcome to the Be Empowered show.
Thank you so much, Graham. It's wonderful to be with you. Finally, right? We've been setting this up for a while, and of course, love to be with all your viewers and listeners.
So, Dianne, I want to show the viewers your book. This is an amazing book. Dianne actually sent it as a gift, and I have been so enthralled with it, Dianne. And I also love the colours and the design of this book. And
well, let me give my an attribution to my dear friend, world-class artist, P.D. Wolfond. And intuitively, speaking of, living fully dimensionally, which I'm sure we'll be talking about, is that I said to her, I would like to have a beautiful fine art cover for my book. And she gave me, and she said she opened up her drawer of small paintings one day, and just intuitively that came out because of the movement in it. And she paints with the intent of having light come through many layers of painting. So thank you for recognizing that.
And so for the people who are listening to this on audio, Dianne is the author of QuantumThink, New Thinking That Will Rock Your World. Dianne, how did you choose that title?
Well, QuantumThink is actually a registered trademark. It's, by description, a system of thinking that I like to say came through me. I didn't choose it, it chose me. And I was doing work that I knew my purpose was to distinguish the emerging new worldview. That I had always done this all my life in different ways. And so I really knew, Graham, that in order to have us have humanity be in communication and relationship, creating the world in the highest aspect of our divine nature and the highest of our human nature, that it would really take a leap in consciousness, in what we could call spiritual connection, in all of the above, in our thinking. And so along the way, when I was younger, I thought, well, how is this going to happen? Because we have all the wisdom, we all know what to do. You've told me, you have been on this kind of a path as I have for over 20 years. As many of the people who are listening and watching now, I'm sure you have as well. And so for me, the mission was, well, how do we go from knowing it to actually living it, to being the walking, talking embodiments? So along the way, I came across quantum physics. And particularly, I came across the book, The Tao of Physics, excuse me, I need a drink here, by Fritjof Capra. And that was the first time that I had encountered the merging of insights of quantum physics with spiritual wisdom that I think of as common to all wisdom traditions, all mastery traditions. And so I thought, well, wait a minute. It's in our culture where you start to talk about spirituality and people get it mixed up with religion, and that's one expression of spirituality. But rather than take that direct approach where you would be kind of maybe shutting out, some people, that if I took the approach of looking at it from the insights of science, from the latest discoveries of science, and applying that in a practical way to everyday, you and I, everyday living, we all want the same things, which is feeling good moment to moment, feeling confident, self-assured, in command of our life, able to create what we really want in life, great relationships, full self-expression, living our purpose and passion, all of the above. So what I then started to put together some principles that I call distinctions in new thinking. And this became QuantumThink. So one day that name just came to me. But I work with my husband, Alan Collins, who's a master QuantumThink coach, and we have been delivering this work in major corporations with, leaders in the United States government, many federal agencies, to the general public, people all over the world via teleconference, you could say coaching programs for many, many years. So I say, how did I come up with the title? So the title is actually, Do You Quantum Think? Because I wanted it to be, when you have the book on the table, you're asking yourself, well, am I quantum thinking right now? So basically, this is a very long answer, but gives the background of it. That putting it all together, people knew about mindfulness, about subtle energy healing, about resonance and what people refer to as the law of attraction, and new thinking, and as you think, so you become. So what QuantumThink does, as a system of thinking, it puts it all together to give us a more expanded, expansive relationship to our own mind and awareness, to our own thinking, presencing the principles, which, as I've said, the merging of cutting-edge scientific discovery, that I like to call for short quantum, and the new buzzword, right? And showing how those principles and the spiritual principles, or the mastery wisdom principles, and most importantly, how we can have that become our way of being. So that's what QuantumThink is, and that's how I came up with the title. So after delivering it, in corporations and to the general public for so many years, orally, I decided, okay, I've got to get this into a book form and make it accessible to people around the world, and make it, I call the book a friend for life. I tried to write it entertainingly, to make it fun to read, and to be able to have it be actually beneficial in a very intuitive way, where you can open it up to any page and get exactly that connectivity, that connection of you to infinite intelligence in what your intent is in that moment. So that's really how it's meant to be used.
Excellent. And you mentioned a distinction. How do you define a distinction?
Glad you asked. What I call a new worldview of learning. There is a very important aspect I left out, which I'll say in a moment, but of the whole idea of thinking as a system. But a distinction means it's different than a definition. Well, maybe I can bring in right now, because the great revelation that I had in my quest to find how do we live this rather than just know it conceptually or as a mental construct, is that though we imagine we think freely and we all like to think of ourselves as independent thinkers, that in fact our thinking is guided, shaped conditioned by what we can call our overarching worldview. So the dilemma today, a worldview is simply what we believe to be true about the nature of reality, how it works, what our assumptions are, what we feel we're capable of or not, what's possible or not. So the dilemma we have today, Graham, is we're in a quantum age. We have much expanded knowledge, and it's all coming out very quickly now. Yet our thinking, even for those of us on a conscious path, on a path of self-evolution, we are still in our thinking very much conditioned by an earlier worldview, the industrial age worldview, also known sometimes as scientific materialism, technically known as the classical mechanical worldview, that began in the 17th century, where the scientists declared only matter is real. So when you look at that, how did they make discoveries? I'm coming to the answer about distinction, because this is really the background of it. That you can imagine if you're looking only in the physical domain, we look separate, we look different. Maybe at that stage of evolution, this is what has continued the kind of unfortunate bigotry and the fear of, different cultures that we still are trying to overcome today and get to a new place with. But when you looked at, how do I study as a scientist? I look into the world, I look into what's physical, I collect the data, I analyze the data, and then I make conclusions about the data and proceed to live from my conclusions about what I'm seeing there as if it is the truth. And this is where we get stuck. And when this maps on to thinking, is that we're living in conclusions about ourselves, what's possible, what we think of another person, our co-workers, our family members. And while we're quantum thinking, we realize we can interrupt it. Now, so when I talk about what is a new worldview of learning, this is one of the 21 QuantumThink distinctions in the system. The art of distinguishing a new worldview of learning. Well, what's the difference? Well, when you're quantum thinking, you realize the fact that there is no separation between what you hold in awareness and what you're observing, what appears to be. So you can say it this way. There are distinctions that we can see in the physical, yet there are no actual separations. Now, this is a scientific fact, and this is what they call the observer effect in quantum science. Or as I like to say very simply, what you bring is what you get. So whatever assumptions, conclusions that you have, for example, about your situation, about another person, what you bring is shaping how you see it. So when you ask the question, what is a distinction? A distinction is not a description of an existing static and fixed reality or static and fixed anything, because the nature of reality, according to quantum science, is we are, and no one really knows what reality is. Let me just say that, technically speaking, from the most cutting-edge scientists. But we could say we're in a universe of energy in flux. That means it's always moving, informed by intelligence. It's intelligent energy, and it's conscious. So it's all of the above. It's multidimensional. But the idea of this is that the old worldview, the industrial age worldview, saw objects as solid and fixed, looking in that physical. That's how it appears. So what I do in quantum thinking is say, well, how did that map onto our thinking? And how can we now proactively update our thinking, just as we would update the operating system in our computer. If you tried to put the more current software, the way the world is today, and timeless, spaceless, 24/7, beyond the limits of ordinary, physical space and chronological time, and everything is speeding up because of the technology that is so amazing that makes this show possible. But when you look at that and you say, well, the software, the way that I'm thinking is in the old step-by-step, get all the information in front of you before you make a move, before you make a decision, or get stuck with what worked last time, static reality, and even when it's no longer working now. So that's the old software of thinking that we need the update. So how do we get that? The new software, right? This accelerating pace, this increasing complexity and choice in the world. How do we get this all functioning together is we take a quantum leap in consciousness to a new system that would be like upgrade the operating system within ourselves, within how we relate and have knowledge of an expansive reality and all the principles and how they work, and how what I call the 5 natural faculties of mind, get in command of them. Because the old worldview was the universe as machine. The new worldview, the quantum worldview, is, wait a minute, the universe is more like a giant mind. So now it behooves us to want to be in the most effective way of daily living, to really get a conscious relationship with our mind. So how do we do that? This is the answer to the distinction question. A distinction means to bring something into your awareness in such a way that you transform your relationship to it. And when that happens, it transforms simultaneously the past, the present, and the future at once. So when I create the distinction, and when I say create, we're doing it together right now in the present moment. I'm speaking. The listening is just as essential from a QuantumThink perspective. Listening and speaking are 2 aspects of one conversation. That's one of the QuantumThink distinctions, being in one conversation. So as you're listening, you're creating the distinction with me, even though I am the one speaking. So when I create a distinction called system of thinking, everything in the universe works as a system, even the man-made things, the road systems, the flight patterns. I know that you know. If you didn't have a system, where would you be flying? You could be flying, but you don't know where you're going, right? So it's something like that. So when I create that distinction right now in the present moment, what happens is you have a new relationship with what is shaping your thinking. Is it shaped by, and by the way, it's not an either or. Part of the quantum leap in consciousness is going from the old world either or, is an energy, a particle, or a wave. Well, quantum science, it's both. And you cannot see the whole picture unless you see all of it. So what this means to us is we can start thinking in a both and way. And you realize that that level of evolution that we had reached, let's say, from the 17th to the beginning of the 20th century, when Einstein came along and changed everything, that we're not giving that up. We learn to categorize, we learn to use ordinary logic, we learn to use that way of analysis, and this is genius. The old worldview is genius, but what we're saying now is that when we go and take this leap in consciousness and begin to recognize these quantum principles that are operating within you and me, that it's an expansion, it's a both and. But what happens, Graham, is when you do this, you, I would say, instantly have a greater command. People talk a lot about mindfulness, where you step back and pause, and that's great that so many people are practicing this now. But imagine mindfulness as your natural way of life. That's what happens when you're quantum thinking.
Yeah. I've got a friend in Sydney, Amir Zogi, and he starts off his book and he says, you are seeing the world through separation. And then he goes to talk about how to become one. So do you believe that this, you called it both and, is the oneness that we all should be operating out of?
Well, it really is, because if you want to get on what you could say, let's call it a profound, but a deep spiritual level. And again, I'm all for, modern culture. We're living in this world. So we can't go sit on top. Well, some people do. We're not sitting on top of a mountaintop in the Himalayas and hoping to get enlightened. We're in the world. And so this both and. When you realize what this oneness, this unity, this diversity in the unity, you realize that each one of us are aspects of what we could call divine being, however you relate to it. Let's call it infinite intelligence, source of all that is, or we could say all that is. We are each in that awareness of ourselves, what I could say, the transcendent awareness, that which we call mindfulness. We're in that transcendent awareness where we can be aware of what's in our mind. And we're also the individualized form of consciousness where we could say our persona, our personality, all the roles we play in life, who we are in this incarnation, if you will. A man, a pilot, a coach, a radio show host, a video show host, all, and many, and all the different facets that we play in what you could call the immanent self, that mundane worldly self. So the both and of it is to recognize that those two aren't separate. And when you look at Graham, how did the old worldview condition our thinking in that either form? When you look at it and you say, material or spiritual. And a lot of people I know have some problems even relating to money because of that. Because you think of money as material, but I want my spiritual presence. So people have not yet, it's changing now, I like to create that when you integrate this, when you make this leap to this expanded framework of these principles, that this becomes your natural way of life, realizing that you are the both and of that transcendent, unbounded, infinite possibility being. And at the same time, you are fully expressing yourself, in the richness that life on earth is. And these are the kind of things that happen. So the people divide, personal and professional. People talk about, well, how do I balance my life, right? This is one of the old worldviews, conditioned splits that we don't realize we're even in until we start to distinguish it. What we're doing right now is we're practicing the art of distinguishing. So now, when you look at, well, how do I balance? Well, if you look at the world in, your life in parts, professional and personal, how would you ever know if it was balanced? We would say in our business, that is being in the wrong question. So what's being in the right question? How do I integrate? So I'm in the experience of harmony. Because that integration, that word, integral, it means whole, it means soundness. This is the very first distinction in the QuantumThink system, is holistic and holographic. That holistic means everything impacts everything else through its interrelatedness. Holographic means the whole is contained in every smaller aspect of itself. So when you look at your life and you realize that when you're at work, can you be connected with your family? Now, I'm not just making this up. We have had thousands of people in our QuantumThink programs who actually make this instantaneous shift. This is the beauty of the art of distinguishing. You could say this: when you distinguish, it's a transformation. You go beyond whatever the current form is. Whereas when you describe an existing reality, 3 parts home, 1 part professional, it's like you're looking at the circumstances and you're trying to manage the circumstances by moving the parts of your life around. Whereas when you practice the art of distinguishing, you're operating from the idea of the wholeness, from the fact of our wholeness, from the fact that when you are fully present with your family, your work is always with you, but you're not focused on your work. We all talk about being in the present moment, but this is the distinguishing, where you're not concerned about that. Because when you're with your family, you're with your family. When you're at work, you're at work. Because you know the whole of your life, your family members, the whole of you is present wherever you are. Wherever you go, you are there. And, that was really a QuantumThink expression of saying, wherever you go. So when we stop trying to balance the parts, what happens is you begin to experience the fullness of your life in whatever you're doing. And this is really how the art of distinguishing works. Now, that I'm giving a kind of an example, but the way it works, Graham, and I know because you're reading Do You QuantumThink, is where I have the practices that I call recreations, recreating the distinction in your life. And they're all mostly practices for the mind and awareness. So it's just in the natural course. I don't know whether you've practiced any of them, but this is the idea of it, is that when you become aware of these principles, of these distinctions, when you become aware of the practices, you're literally giving yourself an experience. It's experiential. That's where we learn. You can think about what is it to have, think of a food that you have. You're in Dubai right now, correct? What's a typical food there? I've never been there.
Well, there's a typical Middle Eastern, which is really, the food's quite different in different parts of the Middle East. So,
one food, one particular to that region.
They eat a lot of meat, like lamb,
right.
Lamb on a skewer, that type of thing.
Okay, fine. So if you could pick any food, but I was just interested to know, since I find your life very interesting, that if you have lamb on a skewer, well, you can look at a picture of it, you can see a video of someone eating it, but if you've never had it, you don't know what that is. But once you've had it, you know what it is forever. So when you're practicing the art of distinguishing what's happening when you're reading Do You QuantumThink? I also have an audio program, QuantumThink Audio Coach it's called, that what happens is you're giving yourself an experience. Because as I like to point out right in the beginning, it's not like I know something and you don't. It's what I'm doing is bringing it into our awareness. That which you are connected to already. That which is within you, within each one of us already. When you bring it into your present moment awareness, you are literally connecting to it. You're giving yourself an experience of that principle. It's a recognition. If you're recognizing it within you, that activates that principle in you. And that's what has it go from merely knowing it as a concept, as an idea, as a picture of the lambs on a skewer, to actually having it integrated in your repertoire of experience. That's how it works.
So let's reinforce this, that when people read your book, that they just don't read it and have head knowledge, but they actually put it into practice and feel what it's saying and then have an experience of it.
That's exactly right. And well said. Thank you. And, that's the purpose of it. Now, we know when we look at, I was growing up, I said, well, what do we really want? What is quantum thinking? It really starts with, what do we really want? So I was a philosophy major, and you learn ordinary logic. In a sense, it's very logical. I say, well, in order to get what we want, to create what we want in our lives, in our communities, in our families, in the world, we need to know something about what enables us to create anything. So it's really, what are the dynamics of creation that as ordinary people, human beings, that we have been divinely bestowed with by virtue of human birth? And when you look at this, you realize that the central dynamic of creating for human beings is the dynamic of intent. So what does that mean? Intent. The consciously directed attention, energy, conscious awareness, where you're placing your intent will, because we exist in fields, we are connected through these energy intelligent fields. We don't stop at the edge of our skin or our body. We're in a constant exchange with this energy intelligence. And so we as human beings happen to be the focal point of that, of where we hold that intent, that attention. So we could say it that intent is the active dynamic of creation for human beings. So when you say, well, what do I really want? Well, if intent is what attracts to us that which we want in life, wouldn't it be a good idea for us to become masterful in the use of our intent? Now, I know you had been asking me offline about, because I make a distinction in QuantumThink between intent and intention. Did I go off of your question? Just
Oh, you can go on and make that distinction. That's important.
okay, because I get tend to we get excited about this and etc. Oh, I know what I was talking about. Is that connection to this infinite intelligent field. So how do we connect? Okay. Well, let me just say. So I make a distinction between intent and intention, which are often used interchangeably. And again, a distinction is not a, quote, absolute truth. It is something that we distinguish in language to give us a greater access to something for the betterment of our lives. This is what this is all about, right? Being empowered. That's your show. So now, intention you could think of as a future goal, something like a measurable result, something that, of course, everything begins in thought, and it takes a certain, so it is a guidance of the thought, but you're taking a certain course of action, you could say, to reach a goal. Whereas intent, as I use it in QuantumThink, is the activation of the energy intelligent field. So let me say this. One of the principles of quantum thinking is that, and again, I'm just distinguishing it, is that we're in an infinite possibility universe. That in every moment, there are an infinite number of ways that we can sort of land on reality, what we hold in our awareness, how we relate to the circumstances in our life. That is infinite. How we decide to relate to them is where we have, that's where we are empowered, where we have choice. Now, how do we narrow that down so that we are creating and attracting, if you will, those results that we want in our lives, whether it's an experience, moment by moment, peace of mind, whether it's a relational result, communication and quality of relationship, whether it's an outer result, what I call the houses, money, and cars, or a business result, something like that, or a spiritual result. So when you look at this and you realize that how do we narrow that down is through these statements of intent. So a statement of intent. Let's say that you had an intent to experience being empowered. I'm going to use that because that's your show. Then you wouldn't say, well, I want to be empowered, or I'm happy I'm going to be empowered someday, or I'm happy, I'm doing whatever. You would say it like this. In the present tense, I like to call the omnipresent tense. Of course, we know, if you know anything about, creating, that as if it already is. The spiritual masters have taught that as well. And you might say a statement of intent like this. I am ecstatic. I like hyperbole, emotion. I'm thrilled. I'm delighted that I am in the experience of being empowered in every aspect of my life. So now you look at this, and this brings us to one of the very fundamental quantum principles. There are no absolute truths, except what you would think of as divine or eternal, for everyday living in a universe of energy and flux. There's nothing fixed and static, like an absolute, that's the way it is. Why? Because everything is shifting and changing according to how we, as human observers, decide to hone in on it. I like to use the metaphor of the internet. Where's the internet? Well, it's not located. It's the infinite mind of humanity, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the sublime. So what is going to become your reality? What are you going to click on? That's where we have power and choice. When you can free yourselves from this old world, static and absolute way of being. So getting back to the statement of intent. I'm ecstatic that I'm experiencing being empowered in every aspect of my life. As I was saying, that's not the absolute truth, nor is it the absolute truth that I'm not empowered. So what is it? Well, the fundamental, this is very, very important when people say they created their intention, it didn't work, is to realize that what you bring is what you get. If reality isn't dependent on an already existing static way that it is reality, way that, my husband is, my daughter is, my sister is, then what is it dependent on? Context. It's dependent on the context that you choose to live from. Reality is context dependent. A statement of intent is a consciously generated context that you are choosing to live from. So something is always getting created because it's an energy in flux universe, right? Intelligent universe. What's getting created is either getting created by the already, existing default patterns from the past, or what you're choosing to create now that's going to shape your experience and your future and the unfolding in a new way. And this is something like, again, using the computer analogy. You go into your computer or your tablet or your smartphone, and there are default settings. So how did the default settings get there in us? We don't know. We'll actually never know. People, the old worldview analysis, well, my teacher said this when I was 2 years old, you'll never be a singer. And so I heard somebody on your show talking about that, well, I'll never be a singer. That stayed with us. Now, just imagine if we could address the actual way these faculties of mind work, in this universe as a giant mind. That how would young people, when they would hear something that was said to them, someone else is in a reaction, what I call a least action pathway, the way the energy or the thought goes simply because it's, become pattern from the past. Give it no meaning. But when you see your least action pathways, you can interrupt them. But you can see the least action pathways of other people. So your teacher is in a least action pathway thought. It's not actually thinking. And he says, you'll never be a singer, so you might as well choose a different major now, right? In your course of study. And if you're wise to the actual nature of our quantum reality, right, in the educational system, which it's not there yet, because the educational system traditionally is based on the old worldview, physical only. We're studying the brain, we're not studying the faculties of mind, intent, intuition, subtle energy, resonance, and meditation. So you're thinking, oh, well, my professor said this, that he's in his whatever reaction. I don't have to take that in. I don't have to own that thought. That's just a least action pathway thought that I can interrupt and create the context that I choose to live from. Make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Just imagine that kind of an educational system. Well, we're working on that, right?
Yeah, so Dianne, I want to kind of finish up by telling you that I've read about your distinction of intent, and today I decided to put it into practice. So can I tell you about that?
I would love to hear it.
So my 23-year-old son is staying with me at the moment, and we both play squash. Do you guys play squash in the US?
Actually, we have a squash court where we live. We live in a condominium with a small club, but I've never played. Okay. Yes,
So you know what it is. So it's a bit like the young bull taking over from the old bull when it comes to us playing squash. So Andy's beaten me every time this week that we've played. So today I thought, well, I'm going to try out Dianne's intent. So I went about, I have energy exercises that I do because I'm an airline pilot, and I'm a manager of energy in the air, but I also know how to do it with my own energy. So I did those exercises, and then I made an intent that I would perform to my best ability and just rest in that and be at peace with that. And so we went and played, and I actually won. Now, just to clarify this, it's not about winning. It's about being in that place where you can actually perform to the best of your efficiency.
That is such an important point. I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you want to say something?
No, that's good.
No, because this is really an opportunity to distinguish something very important, what we're talking about here. Living a life of mastery, living a masterful life, or as I wrote in QuantumThink, what's the alternative? Living a mediocre? But to get to your example, which is beautiful, because what we call in our business, what you had before is an unaware intent. Now, intent is an activation of our personal resonant field. And we know what we resonate, we emanate. What we emanate, we attract. So this is how the universe works, on sympathetic resonance. So it isn't that we have one intent. It's many all the time. However, what you did is you interfered with an unaware intent. It was like you closed down, right? Something operating in the background, again, to use the computer analogy, right? You shut that down, right? So it's no longer in your reality. And you didn't have to actually shut that down. What we actually do, we say, what you focus on expands. So we don't think about what we don't want. We think about what we do. So we could say, and you could answer it, you had like this unaware intent operating that, am I going to be able to beat him this time, right? Will I ever win? And will I ever beat Andy? And so that's kind of the unaware intent. So what happens is you don't even have to be thinking of that when you're quantum thinking to create what you want, to become masterful like what you did, Graham, is that you created an intent, a consciously generated intent with the awareness that you were doing so, that displaced, it took the place of whatever was running. So you didn't have to put any attention. Is that true?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to think that anymore. I'm not going to think of, I can win. That's the difference between quantum thinking and positive thinking. We should always have positive thoughts. But positive thinking, it's kind of the old worldview where we have a negative belief that we're holding as the truth, absolute, and then you're trying to put a positive affirmation. Well, I never win, but I'm going to win. That doesn't work as long as you have that underlying negative thing. But having read and being in this and having distinguished it for yourself again while reading QuantumThink, that you are able to see, I can generate an intent, shift my resonance. It's actually creating a different resonance. And I think one of the most important things that you are pointing out is that intent enabled you to be present. In the state of presence is the state from which all great accomplishment derives. So as you said it perfectly, you were able to be at your best you were in that state where your best could be expressed.
Exactly. And that's what being empowered is.
Beautiful.
So, Dianne, I know we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg here. I would love to have you back if you would accept my invitation to come back and join us.
I'd love to.
That'd be great. I just want to close with your mantra, which says, when you master your mind, you master your life. I think that's a great saying. If we can apply that, then we'll all be empowered. So,
thank you so much. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you for your time, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation, Dianne. And if anybody's got any questions, can you just give your website details, Dianne, where people can connect with you?
Yeah, the best way to connect with me is on my website, DianneCollins.com. It's Dianne with two N's, DianneCollins. And on there, you can connect with me on social media. I'm blogging on the Huffington Post, and you'll be able to connect to there. And there are what I call ultimate study groups. They're free audios of interactive teleconference study group that my husband and partner, Alan Collins, and I did. So I invite you to listen to those. Of course, to sign up for my email list, you'll get one of my articles. You can't get there from here, which talks all about how to apply quantum thinking specifically to your business. And so that is, you'll see it all there. And I would love to have you connect with me.
Well, we'll try and put as many of those website details on our page when we publish this.
The book, Do You Quantum Think? It's available in hardcover and in all ebook editions, and you can get it basically anywhere in many different countries. So wherever you are, you should be able to access Do You Quantum Think as well.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions for either of us, you've got the details for Dianne, or you can go to my www.beempoweredgroup.com and download a ebook there called Know Your True Value and Worth. Or on Amazon, I have a book called The Manifesto of Your Inspirational Mind, which is what we've just been talking about, Dianne. It's all about the inspirational mind.
Great.
So thanks, everybody, and we wish you all the very best going forward for the coming year. By the time this is aired, it'll be 2015. All the best. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Be Empowered podcast. For more on regaining your power by bridging that gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are, go to www.beempoweredgroup.com and enter your name and email address to receive a free ebook and get notified of any upcoming podcasts. Remember, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. Changing your energy transforms your life.